And it's about one of the biggest issues in Denmark at the moment is loneliness. We have what we call this welfare system, which means you don't depend on your friends and your families, and vice versa. Your friends and family don't depend on you, which actually in some way can be positive, but the flip side of that coin is loneliness. So that's one of the reasons I see there's a great thirst for new ways to share more, live closer together.
First of all, thank you so much for being here and accept our interview offer. And you are the first foreign architect we interviewed with, which I want to point.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm delightful to be the first.
Erik, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, I'm an architect based in Copenhagen, which is the capital of Denmark. And I've been doing different kinds of things within the architectural profession. I've been teaching at the Royal Academy of Architecture in Copenhagen, and I've been editor of a magazine, and also had a small studio where it was more the experimental stuff. I've been part of a larger company doing hospitals and things like that. And what I'm doing now, I have this small studio mainly about housing. I've done that for, I would say, 5-6 years or something like that.
What kind of office is this? Is it a small-scale office? Mostly what kind of projects you're doing?
It's definitely a small-scale office, and I think we have the privilege to attract very ambitious clients who wants to build something not standard. And for me, it's not a matter of budget, it's more a matter of the client's ambition. For instance, we did a summer house for a in Denmark, well-known photographer, Isak. She traveled around the world doing fashion photography. She's a hotshot photographer. And I just mentioned her profession because the program was, we want a small summer house, not a big one, but we want to make out of good materials. And it was only 50 square meters, which is fairly small, and you need to go outside if you want to go to the bathroom. In Denmark it's cold, so people are scared of that. At that time they had 1 child, and there were no rooms, so you could actually fit in 10 people. But no rooms, you know, not a corridor, no doors. Now they have 3 kids and they love it still because it's just train us to use the house in a different way, and we don't have a fixed bedroom. Sometimes if you go too early to bed, you go there, and if you're the last one, you just sleep there. And the facade, you can fold the facade away, and so you can include, the building is just 3 meters wide inside, so very narrow, but then you can open the whole facade. It's like folding doors, and then you can include the nature.
You're a problem solver in your design.
Yeah, I would say so.
The approach to the architecture must be more different than Turkey to Denmark. That's why I'm asking you to actually for understanding your approach to architecture. How to start designing a project?
Yeah. I think overall it's architecture is about creating the physical environment for the life we like to live, which means we should love and encourage each other to discuss what kind of life do we actually like to live. For instance, with the summer house, it's like, do we like to live a life with our children where they just have one part of the house and we don't mix with them? They're very small. No, small children like to be close to the parents. When you're about 6, 8, 10, then you could build something else because then they don't want to be that close. This kind of discussion we need to have with ourselves and with the clients. So when the clients come to me, they think they know what they want to, but then we start to have this discussion. So with that, I would say to be an architect, it's mainly a humanistic discipline where we come up with questions, and the answers we come with, they should be aesthetic, and when we add these two things together, it becomes architecture.
Actually, your answer is my next question, because one of your interview you say architecture is a humanistic discipline more than aesthetic, and I was going to ask you, what do you mean with this?
I think, but it's also with the homeless project, it's kind of the same thing. What is it to be homeless? But in general, we had this discussion. Every human all over the world, what kind of needs do we share? We need fresh air, we need care from our mother when we're born, but care in general. We need to socialize, we need to talk, eat and sleep. These basic things, we share them, all people. So with this homeless project, we try to come up with, on a very tiny budget, of course, we try to come up with answers for these questions.
Your homeless project was an experimental project. How did it end? What's the result? Could you manage to build it?
We get a grant from in Denmark called Velux Foundation. They're known for their windows, and they have a foundation where they give up to social. And then they ask me, come up with a bigger project. We don't like to have projects less than 1 or 2 million euros. And with that, I thought this should be easy. I went to the Copenhagen municipality. Oh, I got this Velux Foundation. They want to contribute to solve this homeless problems. They didn't like it. And then I went to other organizations, other municipalities, the biggest one in Denmark, and people, in fact, people really don't want to solve homelessness. That's my point. Because then you attract clients which you don't want to attract, because they can be expensive to host, and people have that kind of thing. Well, I like to help the poor people, but please not in my backyard. So we try to fit in different places, but it's a good idea, but could it be over there instead? That was just challenging, so I'm quite surprised. I haven't given up yet, but you know, we have to move on and do other stuff as well.
Is there any project when you started to practice architecture, it's changed your way and you said, okay, after this project we're gonna be faster, and it's open your way, I mean? Your favorite project maybe, your biggest one maybe? We
try to go for what we call business to consumer and going to business concepts, because now we are in a very, seen from my point of view, positive global position, because we have an agreement in a global context that we need to transform the way we use our common resources. And when it comes to buildings, we use, in Denmark we say between 30 and 40% of the CO2 comes from the building and building buildings and using buildings. As an architect, we have a great responsibility for this transformation. And there I saw, okay, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4 houses a year. No, that doesn't make a big difference. Please change your practice. So instead of 4 houses, you build 40 houses, or you know, even more. So therefore, we have this concept we are developing on. In Danish, it's called godt selskab. If you translate it in English, it's good company architecture. And it's about one of the biggest issues in Denmark at the moment is loneliness. We have what we call this welfare system, which means you don't depend on your friends and your families, and vice versa. Your friends and family don't depend on you, which actually in some way can be positive, but the flip side of that coin is loneliness. So that's one of the reasons I see there's a great thirst for new ways to share more, live closer together. And one of the concepts we're working on is like a terrace houses, you know, like this, and then you have your main house here, and then you have your workshop here, and then you have a private garden, and then you can accept a fairly small house here. I think it's 86 square meters, but then you have your workshop where you can host also guests and stuff like that, and then your private garden. And when you go out, then you have you're part of a bigger community neighborhood. It's very simple. It's very banal, but sometimes the banal and the simple, we don't reach it. But I think, and therefore I think it should be very, not easy, but it's a challenge. I think we can. We will succeed in this one, because there's a thirst for there's a thirst for new communities in Denmark. No, it's just because I have some friends, when they come to Turkey, they are kind of they come back and say they have a connection with the friends and the neighbors and the families that we used to have, but we need to go back and see if we can reestablish that in a new way. because I've done 3 projects where people, younger people, they have a family with 2 or 3 kids, and they say, oh, we want to move back and live with our parents and our grandparents. I've just done 3 projects, and a lot of people talk about that because it's a great problem if you don't have access to your grandchildren. Just by practical things for a young family, if your grandma can take care of the grandchildren, it's very banal. It has been like that for a generation, but in Denmark we cut it away. So we need to find a new way to do that. So we might come back in Turkey and study a little bit more about that.
When we come to one of your best projects in Canada, it's a wooden house.
Yeah.
It's also a very nice house and it makes you smile, I see.
Yeah.
That's also a nice house and I want to listen to the story of that house. But also, it is a lonely building, isn't it?
It's a lonely building?
According to the photos.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
It's a one building in the forest, right?
Yeah, there are other buildings, but you know, Canada is a big country, especially when you compare to Denmark. So, for instance, a building site in Denmark would be 1,200 square meters. This one is 25,000 square meters. The story is very interesting because I did this homeless project and the starting point was shipping containers and cut a hole, put insulation and put indoors. It's much better than sleeping on a bench. That was the basic idea of that one. And then a friend of a friend, he said, I bought a piece of land in Canada. I want to do something very simple. Maybe in shipping containers, contact Erik. And he was living 300-400 kilometers away and said, when can I meet him? I was joking, I said, well, you can come in. We have coffee 5 o'clock. Okay, see you at 5 o'clock. I just tell you this story because of course he's a successful businessman and he can move fast and he can take decision fast. So after we had the first meeting, 2 weeks after that, we were sitting in an airplane with the drawings. And then we met with the engineer and the entrepreneur in a crossroad. They looked at the drawings, yeah, we can build that. Okay, see you. And next day we met on the site and it was full of trees, you know. Okay, architect, where should it be? Oh, I think kind of here. Full of trees, but I know the lake was there and the hill was like that. And then he sprayed, he made a laser measurement, sent it back to the office, and then we built it up in the computer. And then they started building it. And then I went over there halfway and I was like, oh my God, who designed this building? Because though we can see it in the computer, but the landscape is so dramatic. What we are, Denmark is flat, you know.
I think he must be Turkish in somewhere.
Sorry?
In Turkey, we do something like that. Everything is so fast.
Yeah, okay, I like that. No, Denmark is, we have to be sure about everything and listen, and then once again, it can take a year or 2 to get anything solved. It's, come on, just do something, you know. But he was a private client, and so we moved very fast. So we started doing with this shipping containers, and then I said, oh, his name is Thomas. I think it's strange. You know, Canada is a wood country. We should do something on wood. And you know, we had a budget like this, and we ended up here. But he said, Erik, this is the most fun I had for years. But it cost you a fortune. Probably, I love it. So I used to describe it like a Ferrari in architecture, because it was more important for us that it looked nice in like very sculptural figures. So can it be white? No, I'm sorry, because it cannot look too fat. It had to look slim and dynamic. Okay, we go with that. So this was a rare client, and of course, you know, when we're sharing the roads in Canada together in his car, we also start to become friends. And though it's built, we see each other 2, 3, 4 times a year.
How do you involve the local codes and area and so forth, local government, zoning rules, codes? How did you manage to build the project from Denmark to Canada?
Yeah, quite simple actually, because we met with the engineer and the entrepreneur. And the engineer, he just said, look at the drawings, yeah, we can do that. And he started to calculate, and he just sent in all the papers, and he got the approval from the authorities. And the entrepreneur, he was really good. He said, yeah, we can build that as well. So it was just, no one say no. No one Usually in Denmark, people say, can we do? I don't think we can do that. Blah, blah, blah. Here, yeah, we can do that.
You're telling like a piece of cake.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was a piece of cake. It was very joyful because I have nothing to do with all the problem. It was quite complex. I think I posted some pictures from the building site. It was far more complex than anyone have thought about. But you know, something comes out of something and nothing comes out of nothing. So just say yes and see what happens. Of course, if you can afford to pay it, and the client could.
Let's come to sustainability.
Mm.
You're using wood, you love to use wood.
Yeah.
And you're very ambitious about sustainability on your projects. Can you tell us this? What's your aim to design your projects with, let's say, sustainable materials and so forth? What's your experimental projects about? What's idea that excites you most about it?
Yeah, in general, we have to use our resources in circles. And trees is very simple to understand. If you just have a tree here, and it dies and go out, and then it starts rotting, but then they give life to the forest. So when I did, for instance, this summer house, who was just made of wood, and even the insulation is made of wood, I explained that to some children, the 5th grade children, and I explained it that way. So it's very simple. We have to use bio-based materials, what we call natural materials, because we use less energy to produce building materials out of that, and they would last for a very long period. You can just see here in Istanbul, but when you use natural stones, they would just last for a long time. In Denmark, we have a lot of regulation about energy consumption, so the houses have to be insulated very well. So we cannot just build them out of stones, for instance, then it would be too cold. And then wood creates a very nice indoor climate, but also it's like a CO2 bank, because you know, forest is good because that contain CO2. But when we lit a match and fire the wood, we release CO2. But if we don't release CO2 and just contain it within our buildings, then wood is a good material. And also when it comes to surfaces, we can treat wood and give them many different kind of surfaces. But we also look into to other kind of biomaterials. But the challenge is it have to be it have to face the market. You know, if it's too expensive, it's difficult to convince the client that we should use it in that way. But also we have to look, could we actually use less resources and still keep a high quality life? So when it comes to housing, could we actually build a little bit smaller houses? In Denmark, there have been intention that a family had 100 square meters, 120, we just go bigger and bigger. Take it easy, maybe we could have a fairly good life, even a better life if we have smaller houses. So this is also a discussion about sustainability.
What about Istanbul? It's your first time in Istanbul. Would you like to design a building here?
Yeah, that could be fantastic, but you don't have, as I experienced, you don't have any spare space so far. And what I learned yesterday, that even in Bosporus Bay, it's not possible either to make floating, like one of my Turkish colleagues explained yesterday. Yeah, that could be fantastic, but I think also what I talked about yesterday, it's all about collaboration. We have to develop new way to collaborate together. And the people who are able to collaborate would become the successful people for tomorrow. I'm quite sure about that. And well, again, at least in Denmark, to be an architect have been one-person profession. But now the problems we need to solve is far more complex, which is very positive things, but that also demand collaboration. So we should do something together.
What's upcoming projects in Erik Juul Architects? What's new? We have
very small projects and a very big project. But even the small projects, they can have big impact. And we have a project, we're going to make an outdoor public kitchen where people can meet and cook together. It's a small island in Denmark. It's called Samsø, and that island is well known because they produce all their own energy just on that island. So people have come all over the world and studied, okay, if they can do it in Samsø, it's wind energy and how they use the resources, we could do it everywhere. At least this is the ambition.
What's the big one, the big project?
The big one is the one what I call good company architecture, because that's a matter of upscaling things, and how can we make houses for a lot of people in a, when I say efficient, I mean economically efficient way, so it can be affordable for a lot of people to live in a sustainable way.
After pandemic, is there anything change about practicing architecture in Denmark?
One thing we learned that we actually are able to use these audiovisual meetings, you know, what's it called, Sky meeting and things like that, and also, you know, the way we can communicate digitally. And we talked about it before, but now we actually, because we need to have, then we start to use these tools in a far more efficient way. And also, therefore, I think it's quite interesting, you know, we know this is again very banal, but it doesn't matter whether you're in Copenhagen or if you're in Istanbul, it would be the same. So I think that will give us some possibilities to work together globally. And we know that for a long time, I know that, but now pandemic have shown us how to do that. So we had a meeting, for instance, the one in Canada, we were probably would do some other projects over there, because I told the client that, oh Thomas, what you should do, you should buy some more land, and then we build different projects. Good idea. Next day he bought other piece of lands, and we are going to see if we would do that, but Canada have been shut down because of the pandemic, so that won't happen. But we also use that during the process of the building. We had this meeting with the client Thomas and the engineer and the entrepreneur, and you know, split screen and drawing on the screen and blah blah, very efficient. And so at least in my case, it learned me that we can work globally with everyone.
Thank you so much, Erik. It was a very nice conversation with you.
Thank you for hosting.